In yet another shocking twist for this channel, today we're going to talk about a movie that is fun to watch. Last week, we talked about a movie that alleged to be a fun game, but it was not very much fun at all. So this week, we'll talk about movies that are actually fun, and in fact, movies that are games, movies you can play along with. And the main example will be The Last of Sheila. Probably the most famous example of this kind of movie, a game-like movie, is Sleuth, which came out a couple of years before. And it actually has some interesting connections to The Last of Sheila, which I'll talk about in a little while. Of course, you've already seen Sleuth, so we had to pick something a little bit more obscure. Really, there are a bunch of movies in this category of being games or whatever. Maybe Clue would be a good example. I haven't seen that, but that's an adaptation of a game, right? Murder by Death comes to mind. Really, most murder mysteries, most whodunits are a bit of a game. And the Last of Sheila, it's a whodunit. Although it actually starts by revealing a killer, so it's more of a who did it, Columbo kind of thing. This might be the first whodunit that we've covered on the channel. At this point, I can't really even remember all the movies that we have talked about. Either way, it's about time that we get to this, right? The basic premise of this movie is that the wife of an eccentric millionaire film producer named Clinton Green, that's the producer, not the wife's name is, I'll give you one guess, the wife's name is Sheila. And I've got some bad news for you because Sheila is killed in a hit and run at the beginning of the film. The driver is never identified. Well, we know who it is, but nobody else seems to. After the dust has settled, Clinton invites everybody who'd been at a party in the area where this took place. He invites them to a yacht in the Mediterranean, his yacht, although really it's Sam Spiegel's yacht, but don't tell anyone. When they get there, he has created an elaborate game for them to play. So the cliches are rolling in already. An elaborate game for them to play together, which is kind of fun, but also a little bit sadistic. Of course, these murder mysteries usually take place a little bit outside of reality, the place where you and I live. They're a bit larger than life. Any real person would probably just say, see ya, Clinton, I'm headed home. The guests, they might feel that they need to kowtow to him because he's Hollywood royalty, and because, well, particularly, he's thinking about making a new movie and using them in the production, this movie, to be called, any guesses? The Last of Sheila. Anyway, this film is about kind of a Hollywood set, and it's mainly based on real people. For better or worse, there is a lot of inside baseball here. Seems dangerous for the furniture, but maybe it's part of the fun, part of the games, to try and figure out who all these people are supposed to be. The Last of Sheila has some great personnel involved. It was directed by Herbert Ross. I did a video about The Turning Point a couple months ago. So far, I like this guy's style quite a bit. Even if he's been almost totally forgotten, and perhaps for good reason, I find there to be a nice balance of sober, mature 1970s style with something more theatrical. Ross made a lot of musicals and was a dancer before he made movies. So interesting balance of something very sober and something a little more flashy, and clearly he was a craftsman. The movie was written by Stephen Sondheim and Tony Perkins. Interesting. Within the theater community, Sondheim was known for his games. He would organize big scavenger hunts across New York City. If you went to his apartment, you'd be playing some weird game he made up. This was the direct inspiration for this movie. And allegedly, Sondheim was also the inspiration for one of the characters in Sleuth. So The Last of Sheila might seem like a ripoff of Sleuth, but maybe it's not quite that simple. Sondheim was also really into crosswords, and supposedly, he popularized the cryptic crossword in the US. Sondheim was a pretty cool guy, is what I would say if I'd been a theater kid in high school. Either way, a beloved individual. As prolific as he was, I think this was the only movie that Sondheim ever wrote. It preserves a certain facet of him that otherwise, maybe would have been lost, would have become the territory of legend. And it's not just the games that he made for his party. It's not just a snippet of what it would have been like to go to his apartment, but it's also his cleverness more generally, I guess, that's being preserved. That's kind of cool, but like I said, it is a little bit of inside baseball. Sondheim teamed up with Tony Perkins to write the movie. Yes, that Tony Perkins, or Anthony Perkins, as he is known by people who weren't alive when he was alive. This was also the only movie that Perkins wrote. Seems like he was a big fan of mysteries, though I think he helped out with some of these parties, and he was in quite a few murder mystery films as well, like Murder on the Orient Express or Psycho. Well, I wouldn't really call that a whodunit. We have a pretty big cast here. James Coburn plays Clinton, or Jim Coburn, if we want to pretend like we know him. This character is pretty over the top and mostly hard to watch, except for a few moments that are delightfully absurd. I really like James Coburn. He had a lot of tough guy roles. I don't like those ones very much, but he had some really interesting, kind of unhinged roles as well, which are really fun. The eccentric millionaire is a massive cliche, of course, but parts of it, hey, they feel a bit relevant today. The movie is also playing with the genre a little bit, of course, and this is kind of par for the course, really. Clinton, he invites all the people to his big boat, and, again, this is a cliche. The cliched setup of a whodunit movie, get everybody into the same room, get them into the same island, cut off the power, cut off the phones, right? And let the games begin. Okay, it is a cliche, but it sets you up to use a lot of tropes. It sets you up to wonder, when is something going to happen? When is someone going to get whacked? On the whole, The Last of Sheila is unpredictable, and I think it's quite tightly written. If you like whodunits, this is absolutely one to check out. But of course, part of being a whodunit is that it's going to play off of the whodunit thing a little bit, and maybe that feels a little bit tiresome at the beginning. It does feel very different from the usual movie that we review on this channel. The Last of Sheila does have some major flaws, and the beginning, yeah, it's tropey and also just not particularly well written, I guess. But we'll come back to that a little bit. We're still trying to get through the cast here. James Mason is in the movie. He plays a director. The jury is still out on who exactly this is supposed to be, if anyone. It's convenient that Herbert Ross didn't explicitly put himself into the movie. Although when we meet Mason's character, he is doing some kind of dance thing, filming something with some dancers or something like that. Raquel Welch is also in The Last of Sheila. I think she's basically playing herself here. Raquel Welch, real name Jo, whose cousin would become the first woman president of Bolivia, somewhat destroyed her career in 1970 with a little movie called Myra Breckinridge. I have a video about it. Personally, I really like Myra Breckinridge. I think it's great. But I seem to be the only person who thinks that, and, well, back in the day, not a very popular opinion or film. I like Raquel Welch there. I like her in this movie, too. It's kind of a shame she wasn't in more. But, hey, there may be some more gems to check out there. We'll see. There are a couple of scenes in the beginning of Welch talking to a mysterious individual off-screen. This is maybe the most cliched part of the movie. Super weak. Like I said, it does have plenty of flaws. Richard Benjamin is also in the movie. He's probably the outstanding performer in the film. He's really good. He plays a Perkins-like character, I guess. Benjamin had some big movies at the time, like he was in Catch-22 with Anthony Perkins, in fact. Before that, he was in Goodbye, Columbus. I tried to watch that movie once and turned it off after 2 minutes. That's 120 seconds. Should I revisit that one? I don't know. It seemed like a clunky ripoff of The Graduate to me, but let me know if I should go back to Goodbye, Columbus. Benjamin was in Westworld right after he was in The Last of Sheila. That's a pretty good movie, too, the original Westworld. His career really slowed down after that. I'm not sure exactly why. I ended up doing a lot of television. Richard Benjamin was married to Paula Prentice, and believe it or not, he was the victim of an attempted murder plot himself, orchestrated by Paula's sister, Anne. You think your family has problems? Well, go visit the Prentices. The last person I'll talk about is Diane Cannon. She plays an agent, not a secret agent, but like an agent for actors or whatever, probably based on Sue Mengers, who was a real-life secret agent and was, in fact, the agent of a lot of people involved in this movie. You might think that this character is a bit of an airhead, but there's something steely underneath that. In other words, it's another cliche. Oh well. There's quite a few other people in the cast. At first, you might struggle a little bit to remember who the heck everybody is. In the beginning, the movie, it leans on the cliches a lot. It's a bit overpoweringly tropey, I would say. It isn't until the second act that things start to tighten up and that the movie starts to seem like approximately a good movie. Herbert Ross, he knows how to make some mature social drama. We saw that in The Turning Point, and there are some really taut scenes in this movie. A lot of it is out of the whodunit playbook, so it's really dramatic. There's accusations, there's people explaining the crime, things are unfolding, the plot is unraveling, right? It's a very particular type of drama. Again, a little bit tropey, but there are also scenes that feel a bit different. They feel more like Robert Anderson wrote them, more like mature drama, and that's a cool balance. Let me tell you a little bit about the game at the center of the movie. When they get to this big yacht, Clinton's yacht, which happens to be called I'll give you one guess. Sheila, they're given a card. Each person is given a card with a secret on it. The first one says, I am a shoplifter. Now, we don't know anything about these secrets. Are they real, made up, just for fun? Who knows? But each night, there's going to be a scavenger hunt somewhere. They'll go off the yacht. They'll go to the shore, and there'll be a scavenger hunt, which will reveal who has the card. So Clinton will say, okay, today we're looking for the shoplifter. Go figure out who that is. They'll do the scavenger hunt, and it will reveal so-and-so is the shoplifter, right? It's a little hard to explain, but then the movie does seem convoluted at first. But once the games actually start and you see the first round being played, it's pretty straightforward. In general, the movie is dense, but it's easy to follow once it gets going, and I think they strike the balance really well. Now, to some degree, you can play along with these games. What does that mean, playing along with a movie? This is a central question of the video, perhaps. You hear that a lot, I guess, but movies are not interactive. Are we talking about Dora the Explorer here? I mean, can you really play along? What does that mean? Well, we'll get into that a little bit as we go on. You can definitely keep your mind active while watching the movie. That's undeniable. There are some clues throughout the movie to the final mystery, even. In theory, the answer is right in front of you the whole time. But at the time that you're seeing these clues, you're probably still trying to figure out which character is which, what the heck is going on. And you really have no idea what the movie's big question will be. So the odds of actually being able to predict the end or solve the mystery from the beginning are basically zero. If you talk to the director of any whodunit movie, they'll all say the same thing. They'll all say, oh, the clues were right there all along. But it's really only Columbo where you can tell who the murderer is from the beginning, and that's because they tell you. So yes, can you play along? Sort of, but not as much as it might seem, I would say. Of course, you might be disappointed. If you could guess the end at the beginning, you might want a refund, might want your money back. There's a balance to be struck here. And like I said, I think the movie does a good job at that. I think if you like whodunits, watch this one. It's good whodunit. Now, the reality is that most whodunits, most mysteries, this one included, they rely on taking a particular route to the answer. And then maybe doubling back, tripling back, right? If you stop and think about what has really happened, kind of from first principles, it often doesn't make as much sense. It's very common that the crimes are way too risky, way too complex. It's much easier to take someone out with Occam's razor, I find. Often there are some serendipitous events in these stories, and ask yourself what would have happened had the timing not worked out just right. Would the story have still made sense? Of course, these movies aren't really meant to be realistic, but I say this because these movies are kind of convoluted by nature, and it means that, are you going to be able to predict? Are you really going to be able to play along? Not exactly. I think you have to be led down the path a little bit in almost all cases. Murder mysteries, they're an outlandish genre. It would be boring and also sad if that wasn't the case. So you got to play along, and you got to follow the path that they take you on. This is another reason why, is that really playing the game for yourself? Can you really just go out and think about it and figure out what happened? Usually not. Usually you got to follow the path. Now, one tension that comes from this, and you can see this a little bit in this movie, is that, it's hard to tell sometimes whether a detail in the film is a minor inconsistency, like a continuity error, or a bit of just Hollywood fuzz and oversimplification for the sake of the audience, or if that's a clue that you should be paying attention to. And really, it's very hard to tell the difference until clues are actually revealed. They say, hey, that was a clue, right? There's probably a bunch of things in the movie that are also inconsistent that were just mistakes or whatever, right? Similarly, when you start to get a whiff of the plot and how things might be going, it's hard to tell if you've landed on the outlandish machinations of a whodunit, or if you're in some sort of convoluted red herring or whatever. Like I said, it's hard to latch onto the logic of the film when they don't take you there. So can you really play along? I don't know. There is one pretty big plot hole in this movie, by the way. I'll mention it at the end of the video because you really don't want to spoil this film. Ultimately, none of these things break the movie. It's a whodunit. This is pretty much par for the course, but it's another reason why saying that it's interactive or that you're playing along maybe isn't true. Why the heck did I say that this was what we're going to talk about then? Why is that a thing? Well, we'll get to that. Okay. You're not going to be able to guess the ending. You're not going to be able to solve the mystery from the beginning or solve it on your own or really play along, but you might be able to guess how the movie ends, not by figuring out the mystery, but just by predicting how the story is going to go, by sort of reading the dramatic tea leaves of it. You won't be able to tell till you get towards the end of the movie, I think. There were only a couple places where you start, where you think, I might see where this is going. This film is far from obvious in general, though, and it keeps you on your toes for the most part for a few different reasons. The first third of this film is full of a bunch of whodunit tropes. Like I've said, this is kind of the worst part of the movie, but we reach the end of this story with more than half of the movie remaining, and then you don't really know what will happen. Not simply like, don't know who did it, but also you don't really know where we're headed. You look at the little timeline and you think, what? we got a long way to go. So, what's even the shape of the movie going to be? This is when some of the snappiest scenes come into play, when the movie starts to get good and when it feels like you're kind of breaking new ground. I didn't think I would be making a video about this movie until I got to that point. Okay, so maybe you can't literally play along with the movie, but you get the illusion of playing along? I mean, do you? How do they cultivate this feeling that you can play along, that the movie is a game, or is that just, total misnomer and not true? No, I think there is some sense of playing along here, but where does it come from? I think the first step is you got to teach people the game. You got to give people some logic, right? Now, in some whodunits, this kind of comes with the territory. Because there's all these tropes, you kind of know what the logic is going to be. Like, oh, okay, that you're looking for some little detail, or, oh, here's the detective. He's going to start to unravel things, or, Columbo's going to come back and say, oh, just one more thing. And he's going to ask something. And, okay, well, that was, that must have been important or something like that, right? Like I said, a lot of tropes sort of build in the logic with it. But this movie goes a step further, and it explicitly introduces a game. Well, of course it feels like it. You can play along to some degree when it introduces a game. It explains the rules, and it shows us around. Here's how it works, guys, right? Here's them playing. Now, yeah, you feel like you know how the movie works. You know how it works. Again, it is not interactive. You don't get to choose what's going to happen, but you sort of know how it works. In the early rounds, of course, there's nothing the audience can do. You get to see the clues, and you might be able to take some educated guesses about what will happen, right? But solving the round requires exploration. You got to go to a city in France and walk around. You can't do that as the audience. In the second round, the characters are listening to sounds floating around an old monastery, right? They're trying to figure out where is the source of a sound. Obviously, the audience cannot really play along with this. Maybe if you had really good stereo sound, but they don't in this movie. So if you can't really play along, why does it feel like it? Okay. I think there's a couple of different things happening here. One piece is that you get to see a lot of different players in parallel, right? Which is important. You get to see a lot of different strategies, right? You get to see a lot of people giving it a go, a lot of people trying it, a lot of different people trying it, and having different outcomes. I think this makes it feel more interactive. Doing things in parallel, it's almost like doing it for yourself. You think, oh, they should do this, and then you see a character try something like that, and then it doesn't work or whatever. Probably what is more significant, though, is that this movie has a lot of different denouement. Denouement, the part at the end of the mystery where Poirot explains what happened. He puts all the pieces together, right? We see this a number of times in the movie. By breaking the film up into a bunch of different games, we're almost turning it into a bunch of different small little murder mysteries, a bunch of small little movies, and you keep getting filled in on what's happening. You keep sort of being rewarded and clued in, right? That's another good trick that this movie uses to make it feel a little more interactive, a little more fresh, is that there's constantly like, oh, I see. Oh, interesting. Three things right there, right? So I talked about, they explain the rules explicitly. I think that's important. They do a lot of stuff in parallel. I think that helps. And then also lots of different denouement. Okay, just my theories. One difference between this movie and most whodunits is that there's no detective in The Last of Sheila. Even though it's extremely common to have detectives in this kind of movie, there are some problems that arise when you do that. Usually, you end up with one of two things. First, maybe you make the movie about the detective. You follow them through the whole story. It starts with them, it ends with them. This is how Poirot usually works, and this can be a great way to make a movie, especially when you've got an iconic character that people really like, and they really know the mannerisms, and they want to follow him, right? Or her. But the problem, there's a huge problem to this, and it's that the detective will seem to start attracting crime, right? If you're going to follow the detective throughout the movie, well, you can't get that far with them always showing up after everything has already happened, right? With the movie always starting after the crime has been committed. Now, you can do flashbacks, but it's a little bit hard to misdirect people in flashbacks. You know what I mean? It's a little bit hard to hide what's going on. Flashbacks are inherently tied to perspective in a way that makes it a little bit tricky to make a mystery out of them. So instead, what usually happens is that people start contriving ways for the detective to be there when the action happens, right? Oh, Poirot rides the Orient Express. Poirot goes to a play in Brighton. Poirot goes to some island to lose some weight, right? And inevitably, anywhere he goes, things are going to start going down. So if you see this guy, run for it, right? You don't want to be around him. These detectives, they start attracting crime, and it's a little bit contrived. Of course, another strategy is, hey, there was one thing that happened, now he's going to show up, and then a whole bunch more stuff is going to happen, or whatever. Again, a little bit contrived. Now, unfortunately, the alternative might be even clunkier. Your other choice, really, is to follow the crime and just meet the detective later, right? Meet the detective in the third act. And there's a lot of movies that do this, like Green for Danger from 1946, totally random movie, one of the adventures of Inspector Cockrell of Scotland Yard. I watched this somewhat recently, so it comes to mind. Cockrell, played, of course, by Alistair Sim, and you don't meet him until the second half of the movie. He's simply not in the beginning of the movie. It's kind of tricky to cast movies like this, because if you cast a big name as the detective, well, then they aren't in half the movie. But if you don't cast a big name as the detective, then when he shows up, everyone says, who's that guy, right? Tricky. Green for Danger, by the way, one of the few-ish movies of Judy Campbell, the mother of Jane Birkin. So it's a little bit tricky to how do you deal with this detective? Do you have them be in the whole thing, or do they just show up at the end? This movie takes neither one of these approaches, and there's simply no detective. They have to jump through a few hoops to make this happen. They have to contrive a few things to make this make sense, but I think it actually works out pretty well. We have a shifting sense of authority in this movie. At first, obviously, Clinton is the one who knows what's happening because he knows the games, but as things start to go sideways, he becomes less of an authority, and other people try to take over, and yeah, lots of interesting twists happen. Okay, I've got a few more things to talk about. Some of the marketing around this movie. Some of the marketing around the movie I didn't like very much. It describes it as the games of the rich and famous. And I don't know, is there an implication here that the Hollywood stars, they're different types of people? They're different than you and me? The movie almost looks like a satire at times, but it's not really destabilizing anything. There's something frivolous here, without a doubt. It's hard to describe it, but there's a kind of ambivalence in the movie. Calling it the games of the rich and famous suggests that these people play games that are way more interesting than any part of your life or my life, right? But these games are also kind of twisted and deadly. So there's an ambivalence. It's like there's some form of decay here, some kind of decadence. Together, right? Weird balance between frivolity and something that feels more harming, like an addiction or whatever, the highs and lows of fame, as Hollywood would maybe have you believe. It's old kind of cliche, but I don't really like this trope. It's like jealousy and judgment rolled into one. Oh, the rich are so twisted, but also, I want to go on that boat. I don't know. I find myself coming back to the words inside baseball, which I guess is a synonym for who cares. And it's hard to make a case that this movie matters, I guess. There are a couple of themes that are a little more interesting, though. Maybe the one that jumps out at you most obviously would be homosexuality. I'm going to be a little circumspect here because I don't want to spoil how it comes into play, but Stephen Sondheim and Tony Perkins were both publicly gay men, although around the time this movie came out, Perkins had entered into conversion therapy and he'd married a woman. So really interesting story, and I think you can see this play out a little bit in one of the film's subplots. Again, I won't say what it is, but it's interesting to know that and watch the movie. There's something a little kitschy and a little campy about the whole thing. Coburn's over-the-top performance, for instance. There's a couple of really nice moments of just sort of absurdism, like Welch's husband brings hand puppets onto the ship for some reason, and he's talking to himself with them. And he's playing with them by himself. They make a dramatic return later on, one of the film's greatest lines. There's some really snappy lines in this movie, and some cool stylistic moments. The film is well shot. It starts off bland, though. I mean, it starts off without any zing. It's like, does anyone want to be here? Why'd they make it? It's boring, right? What's the point? Nothing seems to really matter in the beginning, but the heat does get turned up, and there is some tension in the movie, and there is some clever stuff. There's a lot of places where the movie is kind of a step ahead of the audience or the people playing the game, where you see like a lot of twists, and yeah, the movie will kind of jump the gun on you a couple of times. There's some real suspense in the movie, too. It's pretty engaging. It leans towards horror a couple of times, but the violence is presented strangely elegantly. There are no jump scares in this movie. If you see a corpse, it's going to be laid out like an ornate table setting. The Last of Sheila, it's pretty cool. If you like whodunits, you should check it out. It does feel suspiciously like a bad movie at times, and honestly, it might be a bad movie. I'm not sure I'd totally recommend it. The beginning especially is quite weak, but I think if you watch the whole thing, you'll be satisfied. And actually, in some ways, the end sums everything up. The Last of Sheila. The end is great. Really clever, dripping in irony, with some thematic undertones, and just a great way to wrap everything up. If the whole movie were that good, hey, you would have already seen it, most likely. Maybe you have. Everybody would have seen it. But yeah, that's The Last of Sheila. Okay. Are they gone? Because now, a couple words on plot holes in this movie, which is usually not the subject of this channel, but hey, we're here, might as well. Let me give you one line of reasoning that almost completely breaks the movie in half. I'm about to spoil a lot of things. I'm about to spoil the entire movie, so stop watching if you have not seen it. Throughout the film, there is a contention that someone kills Clinton because they don't want their secret to be revealed. This does not make sense. It should be obvious that once the game is started, if anybody is going to die, let alone Clinton, but if anybody dies, all the secrets are going to be revealed because there's going to be an investigation, right? And everybody is going to literally put their cards on the table. Your only chance to avoid the secret getting out would be to find the person with your card and to get rid of them and to get that card and get rid of it, and also to get rid of Clinton. That is not what happens in the movie, though. Now, I know that there's a couple of tricks here. Now, first of all, yes, it's not obvious which secret belongs to who, but if one person feels that they need to knock someone off because they can start to see how the secrets are playing out, or they can see that they're real or whatever, then it's, easy to assume that everybody else would assume this, too. The movie, it subverts this a little bit as well, because it turns out that Clinton wasn't exactly killed to stop the secret from spreading. It was a crime of passion, right, instead. And I think generally that's a clever reversal. I really like that mechanism. I think that's great. But the contention that someone killed him to stop the spread still underlies a lot of parts of the movie. For one thing, James Mason's character says that he tried to kill Clinton. Why did he do this? Well, he has the most noxious secret, probably an interesting throwback to the movie Lolita. Shows how times have changed, that secret is considered not to be too crazy in the movie, which is weird because now you certainly would find it to be pretty grim. Either way, yeah, James Mason's character says that he tries to kill Clinton. Like I said, that simply does not make sense. If he was able to realize that the secrets were real, then somebody else could have. And in fact, he got the idea that the secrets were real because he knew that Raquel Welch really was a shoplifter, right? Because he was the one who had helped her when she was in jail or whatever. And that means that obviously Raquel Welch would have had the same information that he did, right? So why on earth would he have killed Clinton when he knew that someone else would have already known the same information, and when he knew that an investigation that would ensue would lead everybody to showing all their cards? Does not make any sense for Mason to kill Clinton here. Granted, that's sort of a small part of the movie, but when Richard Benjamin's character, Tom or whatever, lays out his theory, when he puts his cards on the table and they go through everybody, if someone were thinking about it at this point, they would have said just what I said, which is, wait a second, you're saying that he was killed because of these secrets, but that doesn't make sense because here we all are looking at all the secrets. Now, I know that the English guy, Raquel Welch's wife, makes a comment that's sort of in this direction, but it doesn't address it entirely, right? So that is one issue. And of course, it turns out that Lee, it's more of a crime of passion, but people don't know that. So things fall apart there a little bit. Let me give you one more place where things maybe fall apart even more. And this is what I was mentioning earlier about whodunits being overly reliant on timing. Tom's plan only works if the players discover Clinton in a certain order during the second round. Now, there's more than one permutation that works here. So it doesn't have to be one set order, but the key thing is that Tom has to get to Clinton before Lee does. Tom has to get to Clinton before Lee does. Remember, he typed up the new card, the new secret, beforehand, before that game. He lets Lee see it. And, oh, by the way, Clinton would not have given the cards to couples like that. He wouldn't have had two couples that had swapped the secrets because it would have been way too easy to collude. Clinton's supposed to be this meticulous planner. Why on earth would he have done that, right? So another problem. But anyway, Either way, once Tom shows Lee the card, or, once it sort of exposes the card to her, he was basically committed, right? Because at that point, if Lee talks to Clinton, at any point after that, if she ever confronts Clinton about what's on her card, what she thinks, if she ever talks to Clinton about what is on Tom's card, about what she's seen on Tom's card, then Clinton is going to realize that something is wrong because she's going to be talking about something he doesn't understand because, in fact, he doesn't know that she was the hit-and-run killer, right? So she's going to confront him. He's going to be really confused. Things are going to fall apart. So if Lee were to find Clinton first in the monastery, the plan does not work at all, right? And this is not something that Tom has any control over. This is a classic whodunit plot hole where the ordering of things is super important, but actually not within control. As things happen to play out in the movie, it's fine. But if you rewind and you consider the plan from Tom's perspective, right, before he is executed, when he's in the process of typing up the card and he's thinking, what's going to happen next, right, doesn't make any sense at all. Doesn't make any sense at all because it assumes that he has to get there before her, and there's no way to guarantee that. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, there's a sense that he's improvising a little bit, and this sort of seat-of-the-pants plan. But like I said, he sits down to type out the new card. He must have some idea what the plan is, and at that point, it just doesn't make sense. His plan's too risky. So, oh well. It doesn't spoil the movie, but yeah, there are plot holes in this. Of course. But I enjoyed The Last of Sheila a lot. Hey, if you know a good whodunit that is truly rock solid, please let me know. Currently, probably my favorite is, well, this is a book, but it's The Rooster Crowed at Midnight by Abigail Porterfield. Would highly recommend that book, although I'm still trying to figure out exactly who does it in the end.